All right, here we go. So for today's video, I'm going to walk you through one of the pitch decks that I first made. I actually think this is the first pitch deck I ever made, and this one made me over $100,000. I'm going to walk through it. I haven't looked at this for a while. I'm going to give you my honest take when I see it for the first time again, what I like and what I would change with the 4 years of experience since making this. What would I do differently basically now if I did it again? So straight off the bat, honestly, it's kind of refreshing to see this because right now I usually do posters as pitch decks, as the cover page of pitch decks, like what you'd see on a DVD cover or something like that. So seeing this is kind of different, but I don't know that that's necessarily a good thing. I like the playfulness of it. It's interesting to look around and read it, but I think ultimately, if I did this again, I'd go with a poster because immediately whoever's looking at it understands that this is a movie. You look at this, it's not entirely clear. You see the Netflix original thing, maybe that gives a hint. I'd go for a poster though. Then you get the table of contents, which is always good to get up front so that whoever's looking at this knows what they're about to get themselves into, and they can also at a glance look at the things that they're most interested in, meaning they're probably going to scroll down to the thing that they find the most important. What you want them to be able to do, if they don't know what they're getting themselves into, they're probably less likely to actually look at it to begin with. First bit of content, concept art. Nowadays, I'd use AI to help me make concept art for films that have very little footage. But back then, I had to actually commission this work from someone. I believe I paid something like $200 for 4 frames like the one you're looking at now, which I could easily have gotten for free using AI nowadays. But, it's still cool because I put a lot of work into designing what I wanted and getting them to give me something that resembled what I wanted to look like in the film. In general, concept art is great to have in pitch decks because you want to make sure to keep it visual, especially when you're pitching a visual medium. Use visuals. It's a film, so if it's just words, I don't think that's the best way to do it. Okay, so onto the log line. It's good that this is coming early, although something that I've noticed is there's no video, and I believe that there is a trailer for this. There was at the time, so why is there no video? I would always have a video very early on, whether it's a full-on trailer or a sizzle trailer or something, anything. Very rarely is it a bad idea to have a video. So I'm wondering where that is. Maybe that comes later. But the logline for this is, when a filmmaker stumbles upon an old box of childhood tapes, he decides to use it to help his brother overcome anxiety and depression. He could have never predicted how much it would change his own life. So off the bat, it's not a bad logline. Definitely a few things I would do differently. I'll just mention 2 of them. First is I would describe the filmmaker more. What kind of filmmaker? Is there some kind of adjective that we can give the filmmaker to make it more interesting? Maybe there's some contrast. Dramatically change the entire logline if you write when a suicidal filmmaker, I'm just making stuff up here, or when a grief-ridden, or when an overweight, or an obese, or a young, or an old. It really depends on that. That adjective can do so much. So something, knowing the story, the filmmaker happens to be me, by the way. This was my documentary about myself. Well, not about myself, about my brother. I was very much a character in it, am a character in it. I would write when an alcoholic filmmaker stumbles upon a box of old childhood tapes, because that is a key part of the story. And there's 2 things. I feel like I'm always trying to add a mysterious element to the log lines that I write, something that makes you ask, well, what happens next? Some kind of unknown thing. That last line is obviously trying to do that. He could have never predicted how much it would change his own life. I feel like it's too vague, though. I would spend some time trying to make that a little bit more specific without giving an answer, hinting at what it might be, because it's too vague, I feel like, which takes a little bit of that impact out of it. And the final thing is I would probably try and elevate the stakes even more. So it says to help his brother overcome anxiety and depression. That's kind of getting at what's at stake, as in if this doesn't work, he's going to keep being anxious and keep being depressed. You know, obviously there's something there. I happen to know that my brother was suicidal, so I would probably change it to something like that. Like there's actually real weight behind this. Okay, yeah, let's move on. Oh, just a quick note on like the kind of style so far. I feel like I've just matured a bit in terms of like graphic design. I probably wouldn't go for something like this, although I don't hate it. It doesn't really add that much to me. It just looks a little bit like for the sake of doing something style-wise, it's been done rather than actually thought too much about. I'm talking about specifically the text. So, okay, onto the outline. So I can see that it's a great length. At a glance, this is a great length for an outline. You don't want it to be too long, and that is something I will openly admit I am usually very bad at. I always write outlines that are too long, and I get that comment all the time. I can't help myself, though. I feel like because I'm such a big fan of story structure and writing in general, having a background in screenwriting, having written a few scripts myself, I get so passionate about the story that I want whoever's reading it to know as much as possible about it. And there's just not time for that in a pitch deck. You want to save a lot of that detail for later on. It's just going to overwhelm someone if there's too much. They're also probably not going to read it if it's too long. So this is great, actually, in terms of length. It's super short. You've got 6 paragraphs, around 2 to 3 sentences per paragraph. It's bite size. And I'm not going to go into actually reading it right now. I'll leave this link to this whole thing in the description so you can go and look at it yourself in your own time if you feel like it. Okay, so in this one, I've actually included the first few pages of a script for the film, which it's actually kind of cool. I don't think I've ever done this since, to be honest. It's not usual that documentaries have scripts written, although I think that is something that people should do more of, because one of the biggest mistakes that I see documentary filmmakers make is that they assume that because it's a documentary, they don't have to really worry about the story until they've actually gone out and filmed it. It could not be further from the truth. Fiction has the advantage of like you have to have the story before you even begin, because what are you going to film if you don't have a script? Whereas documentary, you can kind of get caught in the like, oh, I'm just going to go out and film as much as possible and then I'll construct it in the edit. I really like to go into it with a strong understanding of what I think the story should and could be, oftentimes what I want it to be. And then when I'm out there actually filming, I obviously go for what I adapt, you know, but going into it with something instead of just a vague notion is a big difference. It gives you a much better chance at really capturing something. And then, of course, when you are in the edit, that is when it all comes together. But that's the same for fiction films. The final version of a fiction film is very rarely exactly what the script was. So including a script is interesting. I do remember this script, and this is very much trying to show that this is unlike any other documentary out there. This is not your standard traditional documentary. This is actually more of a fiction documentary hybrid. So I wanted to really show that. And it's more of a visual script, more of an editing cue than it is like really getting deep into the story. The outline does that much more. So this is, I think this is kind of cool. It's engaging. It's a fresh feeling. It also, it feels quite professional to have it integrated like this. Next part is the act structure. So you've got, okay, so this depends on who it's for. If this is for an investor who doesn't have a background in filmmaking, doesn't have a background in storytelling, story structure theory, this isn't going to make too much sense because they're not going to know what these terms are. What is an inciting incident? What is a plot point? What is a pinch point? What is the midpoint? I mean, I guess you can guess what a climax and all is lost is, but everything else is a little like there's too much learning that has to take place. On the other hand, if it's someone who knows what these points are in general, it's a good idea to have something like this, because the outline provides provides a bird's eye view, but this is like even further out and even more zoomed out, even more in general, like without all the details, just the core most important points and at a glance. And it also demonstrates to them that I have a good understanding of story structure, and they can kind of determine, that does sound like a really great plot point 1. That does sound like a really great plot point 2. So it depends on who it's for, I'd say. Some more concept art. Okay, here we've got kind of a new element. Okay, what's this? It stands out in terms of everything else you've seen has been about, very filmmaking related. Filmmaker does this, filmmaker does that, script, story structure. All of a sudden you got these 2 cliffs. So this was an important part for this film because there's a big physical challenge that takes place in the movie. So I wanted to compare it to another film where a physical challenge takes place, which is Free Solo. So from a marketing perspective, I think this is a good idea because you're bringing to light a film that's just won an Oscar for best documentary. And we're essentially saying that we're going to climb something that's taller than what Alex Honnold did. Obviously, the two are very far apart in terms of being able to compare them, but nonetheless, I've made the comparison, and it does stand out. It's intriguing. Let's just say that. It's very story specific, though. It's hard to say that one should do a comparison in all pitch decks. I mean, I'm very against like super cut and dry rules. To me, it's all about case by case. There are certainly, a set of rules that you want to follow in general, like having a cover page, having a really great log line and a really solid outline. There are certain things that you want to do, but how you do those things, they can be done a lot of different ways, and especially depending on who you are planning on sending this out to. Maybe you already know who this is going to. Maybe someone's requested that you make something for them. That's actually the case for me. I knew exactly who this was for because I'd been speaking to the potential executive producer, and they had said, "Hey, do you have a pitch deck for me?" And I didn't, and I spent a week making this for that specific person. So I knew exactly what I thought they would be looking for. So I tailored it to them, and you should do the same. Nowadays, I'll make the same deck in slight variations depending on the person I'm sending it to, just to give you an idea. And then we got the target audience, which is super important to have. The mistake that a lot of people make is that they're not specific enough. They're afraid that if they go too specific, the investor will say, "Oh, well, this is too small of a group. I'm not interested." I look at it completely differently. I want to get uncomfortably specific and demonstrate that I know how to speak to that audience better than all the other audiences. Because if I can do that and I can be successful there, I can guarantee that it's going to go beyond that audience, basically. So if an audience loves it, they're going to share it with those around them, and then more people outside of that narrow audience are going to watch it as well. A great example is the film that won Best Documentary at the Oscars a few years ago called My Octopus Teacher, about a guy who goes out swimming in the ocean and meets this octopus, and he decides to go out and document it every single day. So it's like a very, very specific topic. A lot of like marine biologists would probably love this film, but everyone who watches it will get something from it because you realize that you can relate to finding something that you become obsessed with and using it to heal from something else, and what that feels like. It doesn't matter what it is. It just matters that you understand that core human emotion. So here I'm showcasing that we'd actually already gone out and talked to other young people who are suffering from anxiety and depression, going beyond just my brother's story and saying, hey, this is for everyone. And the reason why we're looking at one story is so that we can comment on something that's much bigger. So this is a strong element. I think in general, investors, they want to see initiative, they want to see potential, and this kind of does both of those. It shows that we've actually gone out and done something other than just sit around and talk about it. The pitch deck does that as well. We've actually put something together, put pen to paper in a way that's, it's not just for ourselves. We've actually taken the time to articulate it so that someone else can understand it. That is not easy to do. It's easy to write your own notes. Try giving someone your notes to read. Will they understand what you're writing? I'm not talking about handwriting here. I'm talking about you have so much background knowledge that you understand what you've written and what it means. You have the context. Someone looking at it for the first time does not. So there's so much that has to be done. It's in a lot of ways like making a film. You've got to set it up. You've got to explain core concepts, themes. You've got to inject it with engagement. You want people to keep watching it, keep reading through it. And it's a proof of concept. A lot of the fact that all these people actually sent in video recordings of themselves explaining what it feels like for them to have anxiety and depression and answering some follow-up questions shows that these random strangers who've never met us before are willing to do that. That is a proof of concept. Yeah, it might be small, but it's not nothing. Getting anyone to do anything is always a good thing. Like just getting people to sign up for a free lead magnet, that's not easy to do nowadays. So then we've got a timeline to date showcasing everything we've done up until this point. So I don't think in this case it's a bad thing to have this, because it shows that we've been working on this for a long time and that there's likely kind of an in-depth story behind this. The fact that we've been documenting for the last 3 years shows that this isn't just, a 2-week thing that we've like quickly decided is going to be interesting. No, we've actually been working on this for 3 years. That is why I've put it in there. Something I've learned more recently, though, is that investors, they really want to see that there's momentum behind something. And momentum is literally defined as like things happening in quick concession. So the fact that there's this long time span at a glance could be a red flag. Like, ooh, why has it taken them 3 years to get to here? Which isn't the case. We've been working on this for 3 years because that's how long it takes to actually show this story. That's information that we have. To someone looking at this at a glance might go, well, why is it taking this long to get to where we are? In a lot of cases, a pitch deck would look a lot better if this was all in 4 months. We've done all this in the last 4 months and things are ramping up. Oh, I want to jump on board as an investor because I can see that things are going in the right direction in terms of things happening. So again, case by case. So this slide, this is showcasing that we are looking at a lot of different topics, not just the one that we happen to be the most interested in. So we're showcasing that we are going beyond the one thing that we're talking about. So this is something that I think is super important and not done nearly often enough, which is looking at the opposition kind of. So in this film, we're looking at things like alternative therapy and self-help mega events, psychedelics. Since this, we've looked at things like darkness therapy, cold exposure, breath work, ultra running, mountaineering, more psychedelics, indigenous plant medicines, things like that. But we've also looked at, antidepressants and traditional therapy. And I think that actually strengthens an argument overall. It's always easier to just talk about what you want to talk about, but I think it demonstrates a deeper understanding of the topic and the subject matter, and a confidence as well if you're also willing to point out the other side of things. So then there's a why me slide. This, I would usually say, should be a lot sooner in a deck, because an investor is more often than not going to invest because of the person than because of the project. I'll give you a hypothetical. Imagine kind of an extraordinary individual in terms of what they've been able to accomplish in terms of projects they've successfully created, success they've had in terms of filmmaking awards, money raised for other films, collaborations they've had with recognizable names, organizations that they've worked with that are recognizable. That person having a mediocre project in terms of a story that's like, well, that sounds kind of interesting, but I'm not immediately like super hooked, like, oh my God, that's the most amazing story ever. It's a mediocre story, but it's an individual who's had a really strong track record, compared to an individual who's had no track record, but has, when reading it, has a really great story. The person with the success behind them is more likely to get an investor on board than the product just sounding great, than the story just sounding great. The why me slide is incredibly important. Investors will invest in people and not projects. The projects are secondary is another way to look at it. They look at, who are you, why you, what have you done, why this, why now, in that order. So, okay, here I can see what I'm doing here. I've started out with the film. What is the film? What's it about? Who's it about? Why is it important? Who's it for? What have we done about it up until now? And now I'm trying to talk about why me. So, why me specifically? This is my production company. What have we done? We've invested more than 60,000 years into the project already. We've been mixing it up creatively in the marketing world, which is not the documentary world, but it's not nothing. It's not a completely unrelated topic. So we put our show reel in. So this is the first video in the entire pitch deck, which is a show reel from 2020. Gives you a sense of how long ago this was. From our commercial marketing video production company, agency, whatever you want to call it. So it's really just there to show that, like, we're good at filmmaking, but it's kind of I'm making up for a lack of experience in making documentaries, because if I had that, I would just show I've worked on these films. But this kind of is one of the first documentaries that I was working on of this scale. So I had to put something else in there. Nowadays, I would not put something like this, because I have more credible things to put in. But you got to work with what you have. So this is all of the stuff that I would have probably wanted to put inside of the outline. So I've done the smart thing and cut it out of the outline to make the outline short and concise and memorable, bite size. And then I've added a background slide. Hey, if you're more interested in reading more about the story, here's some more stuff. So here's the sizzle trailer. This is what should have been up front. I don't know why it's not.
A lot of people know that they have a problem, or that there's something they can change about themselves, and that they would be so much better off if they did it, whether it be quit smoking or change their career path or confront a fear. I think most people don't do it because they're afraid of what it's going to feel like, and of maybe even failing. They're more afraid of the change than they are of the thing that's hurting them.
So I would definitely have put this much earlier on. Okay, so another important video that we've put in is we had done a really cool collaboration with a YouTube channel called Yes Theory, who at the time had a couple million subscribers. I believe they're close to 10 million now, but still, even 4 years ago, a legitimate YouTube channel with a big following, who had decided that they wanted to join on as producers of the project. More from a ceremonial perspective, as in, I don't know how much they were actually going to put blood, sweat, and tears behind it. But it represented support, which was important. And I think more importantly, they were going to give us access to their community. This is a big deal. An investor sees that there may be a potential marketing channel that's already kind of covered. Promotion on this YouTube channel would basically guarantee that a couple million people would know about it. I know for a fact that this tactic would work because we ended up working with Yes Theory on their first feature documentary called Project Iceman, and they did just that. They did it completely independently, raised the money independently using their audience, and they also sold tickets to a completely sold out premiere tour, world tour in 9 major cities across the world, completely sold out. I believe over 14,000 people went to these premieres. So as a proof of concept, that's pretty strong. And they're willing to do the same thing for ours, basically. I mean, this is 4 years ago, so a lot has changed since then. But at the time, this was a really important part of it. And this video actually shows the moment when they agreed to be producers on the documentary. So a great little bit. So now we're getting into the tone and style. So I remember being extremely on the fence about whether or not I should go into detail about the tone and style, because it was actually kind of a dramatic style that I wanted to go for. I wanted to evoke nostalgia, basically. So people growing up in the 90s, what are the things that they used to play with as children? Lego, Game Boy, making model trains, and I mean, picture books is pretty universal, not time specific to then. You know, stick figure animations, anime, stop motion, Nintendo. These are things that my brother and I grew up with, and I wanted to use them because there's a emotional through line that my brother still is kind of grieving that he's not able to be a child anymore. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to, this feeling of like, I've grown into an adult now, I'm never really going to be a child again, have that carefree existence and feeling like I can do anything and I can be anything I want to. Now we're an adult and we know what the world is, and we've had an experience that what we want is not always what we get. So this nostalgic element was actually really, really important, both story-wise, and I realized I could also bring it literally onto screen for the audience to experience it alongside of us. But I was on the fence because I knew that it was kind of a bold thing to want to do, not easy, not cheap either, as in to make what I wanted to do is I wanted to animate scenes using Lego stop motion animation. I wanted to animate scenes by creating original 8-bit pixel art animation. That's not cheap to do. Like, that requires a whole team and an entire budget to do that. So it's one of those things, like, is that really necessary? To me, yes, absolutely. It was such an important part of this film. So ultimately, in the end, I decided to put it in because I made the decision that I would rather regret having put something in that was meaningful to me and have that be the reason why they didn't want, like, why an investor didn't want to do it. I don't know. It's a little bit too out there for me. I'll pass. Rather than the same situation of me not doing it, not putting something like that in, and not getting an investor on board, and not knowing if, had I just put the thing in that I really wanted to, maybe that would have been the thing that made them go, ooh, but this is different. This is cool. This is interesting. Actually, I really like it now. I'd rather the opposite. That's a case of like, I'd rather regret doing something than not doing something, because it was important. So yeah, I made these slides to show that instead of showing a drone shot, for example, we'd animate it. Instead of showing us just driving or taking transport and like your standard establishing shot of going from place to place, you do it with a model train. An empowering moment would suddenly cut to, the equivalent, but in this anime style. Driving in a car. We filmed a lot of scenes of us in this car because we were driving through Europe basically on this road trip, doing these challenges along the way. So there's a lot of like conversations, deep conversations taking place in the car. If we suddenly cut to a third person view, kind of like GTA style. Get the idea. Okay, there's a little bit of I remember this actually, that there's a formatting issue. I don't know why there's this big space here in the middle, nor at the end. But I remember thinking, I can't fix this for whatever reason. I didn't understand the coding behind it, and I'd rather have this in than have the formatting issue be solved. It's kind of one of those like sacrifices that you gotta make. Some other like, this is where we're getting into like the making it memorable. So I often talk about the 3 mistakes that filmmakers make when trying to raise money and using pitch decks, is that they assume that the investor already cares about the topic of their project. They don't. You've got to do a lot of work to make them care about the topic. Don't just assume that an investor cares about something because you do. The second mistake is that they can't properly articulate their story. They know what it's about, they know the topic, but what's the story? Who are the characters? What journey do those characters go on? And the final thing is they're just not memorable enough. It doesn't stand out. There's nothing new or original about it. So I'm always trying to find new ways to make things stand out. So I ended up integrating, embedding, I guess you could call it, music players to show the kind of music that I want to be playing throughout the film. So now you can read the rest of the pitch deck while listening to the music that might be playing in the film. I think that's pretty cool. It's memorable. So then, okay, a past work slide. This is coming very late because at the time there wasn't so much past work. Nowadays, like, it's many films that have been successful, so I would showcase that a lot earlier. If someone's going to invest in you as a filmmaker, you want to show that you are a filmmaker, not just a wannabe filmmaker. But if you are a wannabe filmmaker and you just haven't done it yet, but you're on the path, like I was at the time, you could still, that doesn't mean you can't make it. Everyone started somewhere. And I had directed a film before, and I showed it here. So this is a good slide because, okay, in the key participants, first of all, I'm showing that there's a lot of people involved, and you can look any of these up and go, wow, they're really good at what they do. This is also, I'll let you know, a dream list. Not all of these have been confirmed yet, and you can see that by the asterisks that I added here. I didn't know 100% that everyone here would want to be on board, nor had I necessarily actually spoken to all of these people. So it's a little bit of a cheeky one, especially because the investor that I was sending this to happened to be the founder and owner of AUM Films, who I had put as the official producer of the film even before they had agreed to do it. So it's kind of bold of me, I guess you could say, but it's also one of those things where, a car salesman's, one of their biggest tactics when selling a car is to get you to sit in the car. Sit in the car, hold the steering wheel, drive it around, imagine this is your car. Give it a test drive. That's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm putting his name, his production company's name stamped on here. Imagine what that would feel like. If he's already into what he's seeing, I think this is only going to make him even more excited. Then you've got a production schedule showing what we're going to do. So one of the things an investor is going to want to know straight away is, what is their money going to be used for? If they invest in this, what are you going to do with it? So this is exactly what we're going to do with it. We know exactly when we're going to go into production, when that's going to switch into post-production, and by when the film's actually going to be released. I am a firm believer in making a plan and changing it rather than not making a plan. It sounds so obvious, but it's like, just because you don't know 100% that that's exactly what's going to happen, you can't say it, you can't write it down, you can't work towards it. No, I believe you should, and then you should change it as soon as you know that you want to make it different. I see it all the time in like goal setting. It's especially like I don't change the end goal very often, but I will change the way to get there almost all the time. You know, I think this is the best route, but then I realize it's not, and I need to change it. A lot of people will have such a hard time changing their approach because, but I wrote it down, I said I wanted to do it that way. And I'll just ask, well, is the outcome more important, or is the way in which you get there more important? So be fixed on your outcome and flexible in your approach. So here's a slide that I, at this point, don't feel like is necessary and is maybe just a little bit too much. So a pitch deck is meant to get you into a meeting at the end of the day. It's not meant to be the final. I don't think it's ever been the case that a significant amount of money was raised by someone sending someone a pitch deck, them reading the pitch deck, and then immediately sending money without there being meetings, multiple meetings in between then. So you don't need to put every single piece of information you possibly can think of into your pitch deck. This is a ticket to get you a meeting. This is just too much at this time, because unlike the style and the tone, this is much more an afterthought and some random ideas that I had about how we might be able to market this. Not super important. Maybe just overwhelming. Like art exhibition, app, game, children's book. Like I thought there was a movie. Yeah, but these are just, no, it's maybe too much. And then we end, this is the end, with a couple of future projects lined up, showing that this is not a one-time thing. There's other things in the future, which we've replicated this in multiple pitch decks moving forward. That there's more to come. I think that's always a good sign. So in general, really solid first-time pitch deck. This is the first pitch deck I ever made for a film or anything else. I did it in a week, I think, around that amount of time. I had zero graphic design experience. I actually worked together with a graphic designer who gave me a couple of pointers and actually did a few things for me. But for the most part, this was just like a really hardcore, passionate attempt to put my idea into a pitch deck because I had someone asking me to send them one. I wouldn't wait for someone to ask you to send one. I would have one ready so that when someone asks if you have one, you can say yes, and you can send it to them that day rather than waiting a week. A week is way too long to wait. I happen to have the advantage of already working with the investor on another film, so I wasn't afraid of losing the connection, losing the contact. But if you want to see more live walkthroughs of pitch decks that I've made and the thought process behind them, what I'd change, what I like about them, just let me know in the comments and I'll do more. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It makes this makes a big difference to me. I know what you like when I see that, and I'll make more of it. And if you'd like to get access to many more pitch deck templates like this, you can sign up to the completely free mini course that I've made. It's 45 minutes long, walks you through some of the 6 most important lessons that I've realized throughout my pitch deck creation career. And it comes with 8 free pitch deck templates from my most successful projects. This actually isn't one of them because this is like the first one I ever made, so I've gotten a lot better since then. So I'll leave the link in the description below where you can just sign up. Like I said, it's completely free. Cool. I'll see you next time. Peace.